Viewer discretion is advised as we cover many an insane movie and numerous cult TV phenomenons. Now, are you ready to get jacked up? Are you with us? Then listen on.
Yeah, welcome, ladies and gents. Got Mark Shaver on here to discuss Bruce Lee, his kids, Shannon and Brandon, and the overall Lee family legacy. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. I've been definitely excited for the Bruce Lee and family tribute. So
very nice. And so, what was your introduction to the Lee family dynasty? What made you say, I love Bruce, but here's why, and here's why I'm going to check out his other family?
Well, to be honest, I would credit Bruce Lee's films as really the start of my love for cinema in general.
Really? Okay.
Yeah, I was 10 years old. So this was 1995, and my sister, who's 5 years older, she had befriended a family, and I guess they watched Bruce Lee movies down there. And she told me one day, "Oh, you got to see this movie, Bruce Lee movie." Of course, I had heard of Bruce Lee at the time, but being only 10, I hadn't seen any of his films. I didn't know a whole lot about him, so. She brought a movie home one time to show me. It was actually Fist of Fury, his second starring role. And known at that time, I knew it as The Chinese Connection, but it's...
I was going to say that because, when they weren't stealing his, idea, which became the TV show Kung Fu, good show in its own right, but I hate how they, made money off his idea. But
right.
Yeah, it was like Fist and Fury and Chinese Connection were constantly, being, mistaken for one or the other, retitled for some weird reason. So, yeah, I mean, he was off to a rough start. And, we've heard so many of the stories how, Robert Clouse was a disrespectful, kind of a bigoted director. And he had to basically, tell the producer, "I'll walk. Unless, this fucker doesn't know what he's doing, so let me have my say." And
unfortunately, Jackie Chan seemed to have had a similar experience.
Oh, totally. And it just was commonplace, unfortunately. We just had so much yellow washing and just other people just not respecting the craft. And then, you get to Enter the Dragon and he's having to deal, give Jim Kelly a moment in the sun, as well as deal with John Saxon's ego. And he's like, "Yeah, we totally don't like each other, but we'll make it work." Because at least you're not the director Robert Clouse, who, is basically, it's kind of like Cosmatos whenever he worked with Sylvester Stallone, just your ghost directing is like, you are here to tell the cameraman what I've told you to do. Shoot a close-up of me, do this, key B-roll, and, no messing with the camera work because, we're dealing with martial arts here. This all has to be carefully choreographed. And
right.
I have yet to encounter anyone who even to this day hates Bruce Lee. Like, I can't think of a single person who hasn't, said, "Oh, it's a generation thing," or has just not understood or got it. They're like, the only people who I can think are just people who just in general just never cared for Kung Fu movies. All they do is look at the dubbing and go, so that's all I can think of, is people like that who would never give anything like a Japanese epic like Samurai or, again, a Hong Kong film with Chow Yun-fat, a shot in the...
Yeah, that's unfortunate. I mean, there's so many people who...
They're the same kinds who are going to mock Godzilla, but for the wrong reasons.
Still to this day, their idea of Hong Kong cinema is, the poorly dubbed exported versions from Kung Fu films from the 70s, and it's like...
And some of the dubbing is what gives it some of the appeal, unfortunately, but that is the case. And, I mean, I was fortunate enough, so You saw these in the cinema back in the day. Is what you're...
No, not in the cinema. It was on VHS.
Oh, okay. So nice. So I was the Spike TV USA network generation. So I saw plenty of these playing on TV, and AMC, I think they still do show Enter the Dragon. I mean, I see it on TV on occasion here and there. It's either on one of the movie channels or it's on something like, BBC America or just whatever, just easy to do movie channel. It's easy to modify, and same thing with Chinese Connection. It basically got an X rating for violence, but it's just, you cut out just like one or two like quick cuts and the rest is pretty fair, easy to watch, without getting worried about, oh dear, there's some serious themes or other mature things I got to fast forward for because there's kids in the room. It's not. It's definitely compared to Brandon Lee, where it's like you get to the Crow, it's like, ooh, you definitely don't want to show the Crow to a kid,
No, that one's a little dark for.
And Rapid Fire, it's not necessarily too violent or sexual, but it is. There's a lot of off-colored language, so that's not going to fly.
Yeah, Rapid Fire. That was the first Brandon Lee movie I saw, and that was on TV because I remember. I was already into Bruce. I had seen probably all of his, 5 major films by that point. And then I remember Rapid Fire was coming on TV one night. My sister said, "Oh yeah, that's Bruce Lee's son, Brandon Lee." I said, "Oh, cool," And so I knew, of course, that Bruce Lee had passed. So I said, "Oh, so his son's still alive, right?" And she said, "No, he passed away too." I was like, "What?" I couldn't believe it.
He was only 28, but yeah, I'm with you. Like, Bruce Lee was easy to come by, and Brandon, I only really got into in college. Like, that's just where I saw his movies. I take that back. So I think I was definitely in like later years of high school, and I saw The Crow on YouTube. And again, guys, we're dealing with the 2000s, 2010s. It was different than, in the 80s and 90s. And so he kind of did, I think, how do you classify it? It's like he's Eurasian or something. It's like he had some family like overseas, and then, but yeah, he was mixed, and I had no idea that he had worked as like a script reader and everything, but I saw plenty of his movies. But ironically, it took me a while to actually see Showdown in Little Tokyo. But I know he had some like meetings to play like Shang-Chi in a movie with Marvel back in the day, and so
he was supposed to play Johnny Cage in Mortal Kombat, supposedly.
I heard that, but I keep forgetting that. I just mainly remember some of the other wacky names attached, like Cam Diaz, who, that would have been her second movie technically had she done that. It was interesting in that he had like just a really close-knit set of friends who you would have never guessed in a million years, like those who they were, like Jeff Amato, who was best known for choreographing the fight scenes in Fight Club and Bourne Identity. Blue Diamond Phillips, because both he and Brandon had the same stunt double, Jeff Caliente, who's the same kind of guy, who is best known for being his photo double for the rest of the Crow, as well as choreographing a lot of the fight scenes on hit TV shows like Star Trek Deep Space Nine, 24, Martial Law, and even freaking Hawaii Five-0. So, I mean, there's some big-ass names. But, yeah, a lot of people knew about him, went to his funeral, even Steven Seagal of all pricks. But, yeah, I knew about David Carradine, kind of kept him close because they did that Kung Fu movie reunion that was supposed to launch the second series, and instead they just waited a while. He only redid it later in Canada in the 90s. But
yeah, I found that ironic. I actually never saw that, but I explored Brandon Lee on IMDb years and years ago, probably a few decades ago by now. But I saw Laser Mission, which
pretty dorky,
not very good, but
it's good riff tracks.
Little Tokyo, that one's fun. It's not a great film, obviously, but it's
I mean,
It's
you kind of know what you're getting. It is a B picture that has a bigger budget, and I mean, it's by the guy who did Commando and Firestarter. So I mean, it's
Commando's
lowbrow,
awesome.
fun. Yeah.
Dolph
Oh, that's
Lundgren
just it. It needed a
Tia
little.
Carrera.
Oh, totally, and it needed a bit more wit. But I mean, Dolph Lundgren got to stretch himself a bit after being.
Hiroyuki Tagawa is always a great villain.
There you go.
So.
I do think he would have even been in Mortal Kombat had he not been in this one. So yeah, it's a good question, and I mean, to do that back to back with Rapid Fire, I think was just a good thing because Rapid Fire was playing on Fox was looking just for another easygoing violent cop movie, and it was kind of just playing on the likes of other stuff like Out for Justice, Die Hard, kind of in a bit with a lot of the colorful profanity there, and definitely Lethal Weapon, 48 Hours. It just
remember that Dwight H. Little, he had made Steven Seagal movie Marked for Death.
Right. It's the same kind of mentality.
Both are great early 90s
48
action
Hours
films.
A bit, especially with the Powers Booth connection, just the whole clean cut action scenes, just two guys giving each other shit and not knowing how to actually say what's on their mind.
And probably I got to say the fight with Brandon against Al Leong that's got to be Brandon's best fight scene out of his whole career right there.
Yeah. Well, here's another connection. What's his name? Who trained Ronda Rousey? Gene LaBelle, who's now in common folklore known as the guy who choked Seagal out and made him, shit his pants. On Out for Justice. A lot of people are now, Seagal apologists who, by the way, go fuck yourselves. You can enjoy Seagal's movie, but we know he's a pig. And they keep trying to act like he's full of it. I'm like, out of all the people I'm going to trust, I'm going to totally trust Gene LaBelle. The dude has worked endlessly, been choreographed so many fights, been part of the Stunts Unlimited, big stuntman industry, and has so many, is so well worded. Why would I not trust him? Unlike Seagal, who's basically just a politician, just very unbelievable.
He's a big liar.
Totally. So
his old films are cool, but ever since he went, Exit Wounds was like the last solid thing he did, and then it was just shit from there on out. So I don't even watch any of his new movies for the last 20 years.
Mm-hmm. Well, and like you say, it's just you can only put up with so much crap for so long. Where it's like, okay, all I see is the person. It's now, his movies in the '90s worked because at least they were material meant for other superstars like Schwarzenegger, Bruce Willis, Stallone, and he just happened to get it just because Joel Silver or some other big shot producer, Arnold Copelson, wanted to work with someone else. So it's like it's just how it happens. So, I mean, it gets annoying when, like you say, the star tries to be bigger than the movie, and as a result, it's just something that no one is proud of. It's just you can just tell all they do is associate just the negative experience with the movie. It's like, who wants that? And unfortunately, he was able to coast for a while, and people were putting up with shit. But I mean, I have a pal, John Cannon. I'm sure my listeners who, if you are tired of this story, please tell me, so then I know that way you're actually listening. But it got interesting. My pal John Cannon, he's in Dallas still and does a bunch of gigs in Austin and everything. His credits include Miss Congeniality, he's the guy who kills the partner at the beginning, one of the prisoners in Tango and Cash, one of the soldiers in Universal Soldier 2, because they filmed that in Dallas too. So he had pals and connections in Chicago, and so he's part of the stunt team in Out for Justice, and they, Seagal wants to stomp on him just because, he's a bully that way. And the stunt coordinator is like, do not be sitting, lying belly, down, face first on the ground, flip it. You want him to, stomp on your belly, not on your back, because then you will be paralyzed. I'm telling you. And he was all the more intimidating because, like, I got my credit, but that scene's not even the fucking movie. So what the hell? It's like, it's just such bullshit. There should be a rule is like, hey, if it's not in the script, don't shoot it, but it is what it is. And but yeah, I mean, I think Brandon was just coming in at the right time and at the wrong time at the same time. It's just like he was very pleasant. Hollywood was slowly becoming progressive. It wasn't completely figured out, but there was some who were just like, okay, you know, he's a cool guy. He's a decent actor too. He can really be emotional. And, you know, by the time The Crow comes out here and was like, man, you know, what a squander of talent. And I've had a love-hate relationship kind of with The Crow. It's very strikingly shot. It's very well acted. And at the same time, the story is very predictable. And yet at the same time, it's very dark. And it totally reshaped comic book movies. Like, you would not have other stuff like The Punisher or the Blade films, you know?
I didn't actually see the full film until probably my senior year in high school.
It was a while, and I think I just associated the fact that it's like, this guy's so talented. Had he not done this movie, he would still be alive. And yet at the same time, I hate to think of who else could have done that movie and might have ended up dead, you know?
Right.
Now we got this scandal with Alec Baldwin and everything. And you're like, there's still some armorers who are fucking around, and everyone is wanting to blame the actor, saying, how dare they? It's like, no. That's not on their mind. On their mind is time, money, and doing their role justice. It's like, they should not have to worry about whether the prop looks right, or, you know, they're worried about, how do I look on screen? Am I telling the story? And, you know, people don't get it. They seem to think, oh, so
right.
It is what it is.
I remember researching quite a bit about, you know, the incident that happened on the set, and it sounds like they had.
And it killed Michael Mossy's career in a way. You know, it's like, he's just the actor playing the henchman, and he's like, oh fuck, I just killed, you know, the superstar.
Right.
And that's all you saw him in years later. And I've always heard from people who worked with him, he was a pretty cool guy. And yet it's just, everyone's just like, oh, but you're that motherfucker who killed Bruce. I'm like, no, he didn't kill Brandon. But I hate how much like Poltergeist, just the Bruce Lee curse just spread like wildfire. It's like, here's the thing, you know, Bruce was taking a kind of medication and had just an unusual headache, almost kind of the equivalent of a brain tumor, I guess. And so it's just like,
yeah, swelling of the brain.
And so it's like, yeah, that totally different from, hey, some prick didn't do his job and, you know, got the main movie star killed.
Yeah, I mean, Brandon Lee, that his death was, but, you know, by all means, kind of a freak accident.
Totally.
Well, with negligence from the set, of course. So.
Totally. And I do like how we keep rediscovering some of Brandon's movies. Because they weren't the best reviewed, I didn't really check them out all that much. But yeah, I can see why Legacy of Rage is considered a good movie.
That's definitely good. Even my wife liked that movie, and it's a hard time for me to get her to watch Hong Kong films, but for whatever reason, she liked Legacy of Rage.
Oh, and he did it with Michael Wong, who I think is another very talented guy. He's kind of the Keanu Reeves of Hong Kong, just due to his limited acting, but charismatic appeal. And Michael Wong
Michael Wong's a likable guy.
I mean, totally. And he's kind of like Chow Yun-fat. He comes up, does the work, and you know, he was just another a New York-born actor who, you know, did a bunch of mostly overseas work. So did you ever see any of his Brandon's sister Shannon's movies?
Yeah, I did. You know, once I got really, really hardcore into Hong Kong cinema, which was, just kind of right after high school, you know, then my love for it grew from just that surface level of only knowing Bruce, Jackie, Jet Li's work.
Jet Li was interesting because, you know, you knew instantly, okay, no relation, different surname spelling, but same kind of deal. Even, I mean, Fist of Legend was a perfect, you know, based on the same kind of story and kind of a loose remake of Chinese Connection. You know, martial arts teacher defends his school from, you know, communist, you know, Japanese imperials. And so it's like, it's pretty cool. But it was one of those, like, how, you know, who would have guessed that he kind of was able to have his own kind of style. It was like, he's doing wushu kind of like Jackie Chan, and yet at the same time, you know, he's kind of serious natured like Bruce. And I mean,
Yeah.
Donnie Yen, same kind of deal, but a totally different kind of fighting style and just movie telling story in general. And so how people stand out in their own way. I mean, Tony Jaa kind of the same way. He's kind of going for the rough and tough, raw feel of drive-in kung fu movies, and yet, you know, can't even compare. It's like, to compare would be offensive. They're their own oyster, you know?
Yeah, no, I mean, all those guys you just mentioned, I mean, they'll all go down in the Hall of Fame. I mean, I think I think for the last 17 years, I think overall I will pick Donnie Yen as overall the best. But everybody's got their own place.
Even Keanu Reeves, I mean, definitely a popular American guy. Wesley Snipes, has his fans, but he hasn't really done much lately. But, he had his moment for a while there where he's like, he was the go-to, black martial artist, but also just, superstar, just super moves and cool acting talent. And so I think, even seeing people who learned it later, like Dolph Lundgren, that was something to be said for, is like, okay, well, everyone's getting in on it now, even Denzel Washington and Liam Neeson. So, kind of just came down to how believable can you be and how much ass can you kick.
With the right choreographers and such.
We joked out Jason Statham. Oh yeah, Ronnie Yu, who's just a big American actor, director as well. He's kind of the go-to for doing a lot of these lower budget yet energetic movies.
Yeah, it's funny you mentioned Michael Wong, because he was actually in.
I meant to mention that and do that.
Legacy of Rage and Enter the Eagles with Shannon Lee, which was an okay film. It wasn't fantastic, but it was.
It's a lot of fun, but it is, depending on which version you watch, it's either dubbed or kind of questionable in terms of pacing. But yeah, just brilliantly done action. I actually just checked it out because I just recognized some of the stunt faces who had been in other giant blockbusters. But I'm with you. It's like, okay, it's not going to blow anyone else away, but it is kind of a fun. You get it past the plot. It's like there's a few eye-catching stunts.
Yeah, I remember when Michael Wong was like dangling from some kind of a bungee rope or something
Shannon
like
just
that.
Seems natural, guns. Even though she's not asked to act all that much. But yeah, they have interesting chemistry that would totally be perfect in a regular, buddy movie. But yeah, so Shannon around this time, she does this the same time as, Jeff Caliente, again, Brandon's stunt double, was the choreographer for Martial Law. So I'm not surprised that I never really thought about that connection. But yeah, she's on one cool episode, gets a cool kitchen fight with Sammo Hung.
Yeah. I've got that whole DVD set. So, that was nice. A show that I remember in the late 90s when it was on, but I don't think I watched too much of it at that time. But
I had Rapid Share, so I was caught up. I'm like, oh, okay, this is a cool show that I always heard people talk about.
Yeah, I had seen several episodes on YouTube years ago, and then when that box set finally came out, 5-6 years ago.
Nice.
I picked that up right away because I'm a huge fan. I still got my
bootleg DVDs.
Sammo Hung. Sammo Hung, really, that guy deserves more credit.
Oh, for totally choreographing all the fights and everything. You're like, yeah, this dude is important.
Yeah, and he goes back. He worked with Bruce Lee on Enter the Dragon, and
Jackie Chan's just very big part of his career. So yeah, Shannon kind of had her moment in the sun, but she was mainly just kind of, other than Enter the Eagles and a brief walk-on role for Blade and Dragon the Bruce Lee story, and even working with the band Medicine and contributing some vocals for that band's song in The Crow. Yeah, she just had very limited connections, just kind of, I guess, more of an activist and casual actor.
Yeah, I think she's kind of been in charge of like the Bruce Lee kind of the Bruce Lee brand, so to speak.
Yeah. She was later in a Sci-Fi Channel movie called Epic, and then now helped.
I saw one other movie that she was in called High Voltage, I think.
Yes, that was a Isaac Florentine directed movie with Antonio Sabato, batshit craziness, and it was all right.
It was okay. I mean, she was the best part of it, I got to say. So
totally. And this is before Isaac found better scripting, and she got to work with George Chiang, who's always a go-to kind of guy and a henchman in many of these movies. So I mean, so Cage 2 with Lou Ferrigno, I didn't find that to be all that spectacular compared to the first one, which was just a fun, schlocky action fest with Lou and Red Brown. But yeah, it is so 1, 2, Free, and then Enter the Eagles and Blades 5.
There's one other, I haven't even seen the film yet. I bought it sometime late last year.
Oh, really?
Just to get around to watching it. Is Lessons for an Assassin.
So I saw that online back in the day as well. I had a lot of fun with it. It's confusing as hell, but it's kind of a fun. It kind of reminds me of like the Replacement Killers. Kind of. It's just
really
that one of those just kind of just a corporation called the Corporation, and just once you get past some of the questionable acting, it really does actually deliver. There are some decent fights. She has some okay knife fighting and everything, and there's some plot holes, but it's pretty good for what it is as a, B action movie.
I remember seeing that. I remember seeing the cover of that somewhere a long time ago in some video store constantly, but
it just didn't look appealing, and yet at the same time, everyone kind of wanted to secretly, watch it and see what it was like. And I was going to get to it anyway because the bad guy is played by Michael Dorn, Worf from Star Trek, so that's an instant win right there. But it was cool just seeing him hold a gun and just kind of really ham it up and just be like, "Hey, you're not playing by the rules, assassins," So it's kind of cool to see.
I gotta watch that one soon because I felt like my collection was because going back to Bruce, there's nobody's films I've bought more than Bruce Lee's films. VHS to DVD to remastered DVD to Hong Kong Legends DVDs for no reason to buy them, and then Blu Ray set, and then another Blu Ray. It's like finally, I had to stop.
All good. So
but, I felt like what I want like one more Shannon Lee movie, even though I kind of read that she wasn't the main character in that film, but
yeah, and I think you're in good hands. It definitely would be a fun if you saw it at a thrift store to just pick it up and have a lot of martial artists themselves are going to definitely check out some of these B action, made for TV, direct video films, because they can be fun. And it's so wild how many of these movies had pretty much the exact same plot as something like a Equalizer, Taken, or John Wick, just a shadowy hitman guild or, contract killers. And once you give it a few minutes, it really does take off. It is just so much fun, and she does get probably her best fights that I've seen in her
that's
career.
Good. Yeah, because nothing from Enter the Eagles. Even though Corey Yuen did that film, I thought, I haven't watched it for quite a while, but I've seen it maybe twice, and I remember there was like a fight scene in like a barn somewhere near the beginning.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
And then Shannon, she had her hair really short, and then she was kind of doing the Bruce Lee mimicking stuff, and
totally.
Then I just remembered the finale was in some kind of a blimp or something like that.
Yeah, pretty much it. And I think
a lot more gunplay in that film, which is totally fine.
Oh, totally.
I put them both, martial arts and gunplay, on kind of a equal pedestal in terms of what I like in action films, especially Hong Kong ones.
Yeah, I think you pretty much summed it up, because both these guys deserved at least 20 plus more movies, and I'm just glad that Shannon, like you say, was in charge of the Bruce's estate with her mother, and they brought the show Warrior to Cinemax, which is basically what Kung Fu was supposed to basically be all these years. And like you say, it's just cool to see. But yeah, it seems like Shannon just kind of did mostly just singing, believe it or not. Like she did a song that's in China Strike Force, which is a crazy funny movie starring Aaron Kwok and Mark Dacascos.
Coolio, yeah. I've got that movie.
I saw it on Spike TV, and that was another one where you're like, I don't know what I just watched. Cool stunts, shitty plot.
Yeah, Stanley Tong. I mean, that guy.
Yeah.
That guy. I mean, he did some of Jackie's best work from the '90s.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, his films were what got me. Like right after Bruce, it was right around the time, mid '90s, where like Police Story 3 Super Cop had just been released in U.S. theaters under Super Cop, and that was the first Jackie Chan movie I saw. I remember I saw it in the theater. Of course, it was the dubbed version, and since then I've picked up the original Hong Kong version, which is definitely better. But I mean, it's funny because there was a Warren G song on the soundtrack for the U.S. release with Adina Howard, and they had Jackie Chan appear in the music video.
Really? Oh my God! So
yeah. It's called "What's Love Got to Do with It." It's like a remake of the Tina Turner one. So,
wow. The more you know. Yeah, I always had fun with that one, and it was just kind of cool to see. Just practical stunts that were better done than some of Jet Li and Jackie's American work. And
yeah, and then Rumble in the Bronx. I mean, that had already come out in the U.S. And
the uncut version is the better way to go because you actually get the whole story.
That one I haven't seen. Most of Jackie's films I saw the original versions finally, but Rumble in the Bronx, First Strike, a couple of those films, even the U.S. Blu-rays that came out, even the Hong Kong Blu-rays that came out were the U.S. versions of those films for whatever reason. I think it was something to do with Warner Brothers.
Something questionable, yeah. And it just kind of was eye-opening to just see is like, okay, just because they're giant studios doesn't necessarily mean that they respect the artists. So I think post-Me Too, we're finally getting a lot of people who, everyone likes to act like it's too much he said, she said stuff. I think it's more than that. I think it's just a wake-up call that everyone has to learn the meaning of empathy and just remind themselves what respect means, And
yeah.
And fortunately, there are a lot of people who are finally, again, getting their due wages and not being treated like shit behind the scenes anymore, which is good. But there's still some people we got to root out, unfortunately.
Yeah. Unfortunately, there probably always will be somebody, but
you do, except keep reporting them. So, yeah, no, I'm with you. Like, they have their sparse moments that are just fun, and even when they're in B movie territory, it's just you can't help but just kind of acknowledge that it's like, you guys are doing pretty good, considering what you got,
Even, going back to Bruce again, I mean, we mentioned Fist of Fury, Enter the Dragon, Game of Death. I mean, that one.
And you can't blame them for wanting to ape their, father's successful careers. Like, that's what they were doing. It's like they were trying to make him proud. What would you do?
I got to mention too the Big Boss. Actually, I'd say the Big Boss and Fist of Fury were my favorites from Bruce. I mean, everybody thinks Enter the Dragon is the best, and I can see why. I mean, it's a classic, of course. I mean,
kind of more into Chinese Connection.
Yeah, I mean those original films. I mean, yeah, they're not. I mean, Enter the Dragon was cool. It's like a little bit Hollywood, but I mean, it was kind of a groundbreaking film. The first time I think that Hollywood and Hong Kong kind of collaborated on a film.
1,000%. And That's just how it had to be made. He had to take a J-type plot.
No, I mean, it's totally cool.
Still,
cool film.
if your movie, if it's not Michael Dorn influenced a, deadliest game ever played kind of movie too, and often I do see a lot of people who will say, it's like that's totally what I was inspired by, was this movie.
Enter the Dragon.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, that film's influence, it definitely is far-reaching.
Oh, far-reaching, pretty successful. It just fast-paced, beginning to end.
Yeah, that's one film I got to say. Even though I said I wouldn't buy any more copies, but I have the. It was the, what was it? 40. It must have been the 40th anniversary Blu Ray. The one that they put out. It didn't have the classic poster art anymore, but it had just the close-up of Bruce's face in the mirror with those, with the iconic scratches on his face from, Han's fake hand and all that. But, and that Blu-ray is pretty decent overall, but, I got to stop going on those sites where they show like comparisons between different Blu-ray releases,
it's
because
a lie.
then I see it's like the image is a little bit cropped and this and that, and it's like, okay, maybe if they put out a 50th anniversary edition next year on Blu-ray and it's perfect, okay, I'll probably buy it, but then that's got to be it.
Well, and I hate it when some of those. I mean, I'm only going to do X amount of research and everything, and I even had to reset my PS3 even recently because I was like, it's got to be connected to the internet. Otherwise, it goes by the old-fashioned encryption code where it's like if you got no internet connection, you can't even play any Blu-ray media. So, yeah, it's a thing on older Blu-ray models, but that sucks. It's like, no, you play this now. But I was the same way where it's like, okay, which copy do I get? Because I'm only going to buy certain copies of movies if I want certain special features. But again, everyone's got a set budget. So it's like, okay, I'll do this German Blu-ray if it's region free, or if it's region 2, but I can play it on one of my portable DVD or Blu-ray players. So yeah, while I'm working at, on the clock. And I think it's like you say, it's just these guys that they have an endless just appeal. And I mean,
that's a great way to put it. It is an endless appeal because it's been going on 30 years now since I've been watching, as a fan of Bruce Lee. So
I never even saw World Martial Arts Council, but apparently that was a thing that would come on after like Power Rangers, and Shannon was like the host of that. Did you ever see that?
I don't remember seeing that. No.
It was apparently, it was produced by the Power Rangers company, and it just aired on like local Fox stations,
I remember seeing one thing probably in the late 90s. It was like Wesley Snipes was the host of it, and it was some kind of
Masters of the Martial Arts, and it aired on TNT. You can even find the whole thing on YouTube still.
Was that it? I remember it was.
Yeah, because he was a big deal. It kind of was, and he had something for everyone. He had a bunch of up-and-coming black comedians do some stand-up and hosting, and then he had, a bunch of martial arts perform. And, I mean, it made sense that he was funding it because, he was hot shit at that moment. All his kind of like, he was like the better version of Seagal, all just doing a bunch of crowd-pleasing action films each year, and Blade was already a thing that same year. So yeah, I mean, he had some power to say, hey, let's do a TNT, cable TV special after your Mortal Kombat show ends. Let's do a fun, just tribute of, again, this side of pop culture. So.
I keep wondering, how would that first Mortal Kombat film have turned out with Brandon Lee in the role?
Oh, imagine Shannon Lee being in one of the roles. But
she could play like Kitana, or
I don't think Mortal Kombat would even exist without Enter the Dragon. So that's a good point.
Well, yeah, no, I'm a huge MK fan, and that's right. I mean, pretty much Enter the Dragon. I mean,
even just Running Man or any other kind of just fight to the death kind of movie, just.
Yeah, Bloodsport, and
I mean, and I always grin when I see a hallway mirror fight, like, be it John Wick 2 or even
John Wick 2.
Even something as dumb as Skyscraper with The Rock. There's like 3 hallway of mirrors as a defense mechanism in the building. I'm like, I see what you're a fan of. Nice. And it's just interesting to always, you can just tell through and through, like what kind of a martial arts movie fan you are.
It's funny how, obviously when people see the, like the nunchaku weapon, they think Bruce Lee. I think most people do. And Enter the Dragon being his most famous film, he only used that weapon very briefly in that underground fight,
Right. It's such a good build-up, and then when he uses it, you're like, whoa, I had no idea. And it's even more fun even when his movies can become kind of a party game, because you want to see how suspenseful he can be with his style, let alone, who did he kill, let alone who did he just beat the shit out of. And I don't think he ever had a high body count in his movies, but it might as well be. It's like just even him fighting then unknown, stuntman Jackie Chan, briefly, that was a fun YouTube meme that kind of kept popping up. It's like, so that's where he got to start. It's one of his first roles. But so technically Bruce and Jackie did fight,
Yeah, very briefly. Yeah. And then he got his neck snapped.
Mm-hmm. I love you, Jackie, but
it's also fun, picking out the little, like, the other little, I guess you could call them Bruce Lee trademarks. Like most of his films had that scene where he would taste his blood and like spit it out and then just go crazy.
It was really just a cunning way to go about it. And I can't, I think if I had to pick it a little more, I think I would just say that's just Bruce through and through. Is like, how would someone strike? Would he strike like a lion or would he strike like a tiger? And I think, it's like however he responds, is like he gets, and unfortunately, I think there are still just some people, they just think martial arts movies are mindless, fun, and cool. And it's like, no, with Bruce Lee, it definitely introduced a lot of philosophy into that subgenre of action films. And, Brandon just kind of was one of those, he's kind of embracing the spirit of his father, Bruce, but he's, more often than not, he was in a Lethal Weapon type movie or just an easygoing kind of crowd pleaser that, unfortunately didn't give him the best dialogue to work with, despite his training at some big, LA theaters. So, and training. So, and Shannon, I wasn't surprised, but, doing some brief direct video action films and overseas productions and then reality TV and music. So, it's pretty interesting though still.
Yeah, speaking of that, it sounded like, because I upgraded Legacy of Rage some years ago from like a VHS to a DVD copy, that Shout Factory one, and I listened to the commentary from Ronnie Yu and had Mike Leader on there as well, and they were kind of talking about, because the Hong Kong stunt guys and then whatever potential triad organizations that could have been involved at that time, it sounded like Brandon Lee kind of didn't work well with them. They thought he was they said that they thought he was like arrogant or something, just which I don't think he never came across as arrogant.
And that's right. Yeah, Ronnie Yu directed Legacy of Rage, and he directed his sister. So but yeah, no, that is interesting though too, because he was just at the peak of his stardom, and he wants to focus on his craft, so he doesn't really care about what anyone else thinks at this moment. Yeah.
Yeah, it would have been cool to see him do a few more films in Hong Kong, but
absolutely.
But
But you recommend that Shout Factory release? You just thought it was a pretty cool upgrade?
Yeah, I mean, VHS. VHS is definitely past its day.
Oh, so the commentary track was actually on the VHS?
No, on the DVD. That was on the DVD.
I was about to say. Okay.
I had first bought that film on VHS, and then finally I saw it in the store one day on that new DVD, and I said, "This film is definitely good enough to upgrade to DVD and retire the VHS." So,
all good. Well, so that's wild. They just were just like, yeah, no, just not taking
it. Yeah, I mean, I think from the sounds of things, I think some of that stuff died out, potentially at least back in the 90s, like the whole like triads kind of getting involved with film productions. I could be wrong about that, but I don't hear about it anymore.
Yeah, you'd like to think it's changed a bunch, but you never know. So, I mean, it's definitely interesting seeing just how it came about. But that's cool that, again, you have all these extra special features.
Yeah, and it was cool. Bolo Young was in that film too. After being in Enter the Dragon, I mean, they got to have like that brief alleyway fight, so that was cool. And then you can clearly see like John Woo's influence on the gunplay in that film. I mean, it came out like the same year as A Better Tomorrow.
Yes,
that forever changed the gunplay choreography, and not just Hong Kong, but pretty soon you'd start to see like. I remember watching The Untouchables, and I could be wrong, but when I was watching like that gunfight near the end of the film, I thought this guy must have seen, Brian De Palma. He must have seen some of John Woo's work at that time. Just the way he filmed it.
You would think somewhere, somehow, or using some of the same kind of camera techniques. So yeah, it was interesting always when seeing overseas movies, especially in Italy and China and even South Korea and Brazil, what techniques are very exclusive to certain cultures versus, just various other filmmakers in general. Like, I know that's why John McTiernan, for Predator, he hired a certain cinematographer because he loved the obscure movie Attack Force C. And when I found that out years later, I saw that movie in college, years after I'd already seen, Predator, but it's like, wow, okay, cool. I didn't know.
Yeah, it's cool how that you just every now and then you find out something. I mean, I've heard about it for a while now, but supposedly Van Damme was originally supposed to be in the Predator suit.
Yeah, he quit after a while just because he was a crybaby. He was like, no, I don't get to do what I want. It's like, no, you don't get it.
Oh, and then that old Chuck Norris movie, Missing in Action.
Mm-hmm.
I remember watching
a lot
that.
of the Canon Films guys, for that matter. Michael Dudikoff is pretty much just
seeing Van Damme's name in the credits. I guess he was some sort of a.
He was a stuntman in one scene, and he confirmed it years later. Yeah. He's like, "Yeah, I'm just pretty much an extra who did a stunt."
What would you say if you could pick your favorite fight? Because I mean, my personal favorite, like I said, for Brandon Lee, it's got to be End of Rapid Fire. But for Bruce, I'd have to think about that for a minute. What
totally Chinese Connection. Like, that was my first one, and it depends. I mean, the Big Boss is kind of his warm up, and then, like you say, Fist of Fury just really just owns. And obviously his Chuck Norris one, Return of the Dragon, or depending on what you want to call it,
Way of the Dragon, and
it's kind of more of a. It's just basically just leftovers, and it just got that appeal just because of that final fight.
Yeah, I mean the Way of the Dragon, and had that one other. It had that alleyway fight where he took out like two nunchakus, and that part was pretty cool. That film was way more lighthearted than Bruce's other films, and it's funny because he directed that film too. So
funny how that works. Yeah.
I mean, you could tell Bruce had a sense of humor.
You would like to
remember
hope,
those those scenes in like Fist of Fury where he was like wearing those disguises, and he was pretending to be like the telephone repairman and the old man and all that.
Totally. So it's been a minute since I've seen Legacy of Rage. I'm sure it'll rank somewhere. So, I mean, we pretty much got to rank these guys all on the same list since they don't make a top 10 by themselves. So how about I just make this easy for us? It's like Shannon's, I'm going to put Lessons of an Assassin and Enter the Eagles. And what was the first one she did? We just had it.
High Voltage.
Yeah, High Voltage. So even though she doesn't do enough, it's still cool to see her in there. So yeah, that's free right there. And
yeah, I would say Enter the Eagles probably overall was the best movie that I've seen that she was in. I think then I'd have to say High Voltage. I mean, I really liked her scenes in that film. And then, I mean, I still haven't seen Lessons for an Assassin, so
yeah. So
it's a cop out, but I guess Blade, even though she's just in it for like a second.
Oh, okay, so perfect. So she's got 4 movies right here. Brandon, obviously, we can include. I mean, well, shoot. Well, if we're gonna, let's just put Blade in the honorable mentions since she's just an extra. So yeah, well, we got free for Shannon and Brandon. So we got Legacy of Rage, Rapid Fire, The Crow, and Showdown. So that's 4 right there too. So that leaves us with 7. So, but Bruce has about 6 movies. So how would we divide the rest of that list? Just
how would you rank Brandon's films? Would you put?
I was thinking we could combine them all together, but.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, so Bruce, Brandon's just obviously The Crow is his most popular one, but yeah, I'm just more privy to the down and dirty, just kind of violent cop movies he did. So, I mean, obviously I got to rewatch Legacy, but I still rank Rapid Fire. I've come to really enjoy it. I was disappointed initially because the plot was kind of weak sauce, but over time, I learned to just stop being cynical and stop listening to what critics said, and just say, these are actually pluses, This is practically the plot to Rush Hour, except done better,
Yeah, I'd say, I mean, Rapid Fire, I'd have to say is my favorite one from Brandon. I mean, it's the first one I saw. It's got his best fight work in it. But, I mean, otherwise, The Crow is... I'd say The Crow has his best performance for sure.
Oh, totally. Now, here's the other question for you. I just kind of had to remind myself. So, did you ever watch The Green Hornet, which was kind of Bruce's just, main foot in the game after being a fight choreographer?
No, I've never seen any episodes of that at all. I've seen.
I would always
clips.
watch. Yeah, I would watch clips growing up. I could never get into that show. It just was always kind of a poor man's, in my opinion, Batman. And that says a lot since Batman, the fights aren't convincing, but that's part of the camp, and Bruce, I was fortunate enough to see, him in just bit parts like the movie The Orphan, as well as Marlowe, which is a silly, noir tribute with James Garner, and it's kind of whatever, but it was interesting just seeing him pop up. I'm like, oh my God, that's Bruce Lee, where he was well known.
Yeah, even like there's been so many so many things with Bruce popping up. Like, I believe somebody had filmed something at Sharon Tate's funeral, and they caught
Something
Bruce
like
Lee in
that,
the
yeah.
audience or something like that. And
Mm-hmm.
because I think he trained her.
I think so. Yeah.
I know he had a lot of those guys in Hollywood as his students, like James Coburn and Steve McQueen, and
That makes sense because, yeah, The Wrecking Crew was one of Dean Martin's Matt Helm movies. So, yeah, I'm sure that was pretty much his whole recruit for the studio.
What do you think about, like the Ip Man movies where, it's kind of, like, I guess kind of a semi-fictionalized telling of Bruce Lee's teacher and stuff like that. I mean,
Yeah, it's an interesting predicament because, every time I always end up wondering, man, what would have happened from here? And I think I'm overall just mainly happy that some of his other movies that he wrote or choreographed were eventually seen. Like he apparently did another movie called Fist of the Unicorn, which is seen overseas, and
yeah,
Circle of Iron, I think, is worth watching, even though it's by Roger Corman's studio and stars. It was also co-written by Coburn, and it stars David Carey and Christopher Lee.
It's interesting because that reminded me of some of those other films that he was going to do. Like, I don't know if you ever seen those photos of Bruce where he was in costume. I guess he was doing a costume rehearsal for Shaw Brothers.
I think so,
but he never made a movie for them. And then there was another Golden Harvest one that Lo Wei did, which supposedly Bruce didn't get along with him.
And he was one of the guys who kind of ripped off Bruce, posing as one of the many Bruce Lees, right?
He was the director of, he did The Big Boss and Fist of Fury.
Oh, okay, shit. No, so sorry. I thought there was another guy called Wei also who was like one of the, after Game of Death, it became popular for studios to come out with, people who couldn't read, just taking advantage of that and say, they were the asylum before the mockbuster thing. He's like, hey,
yeah,
Bruce Lee.
Bruce, all the fake Bruce Lees.
Some of them tried to become legit, but most of them were just, amateurs who shot in front of a camera, and sometimes they'd illegally use stock footage without any permission of an estate. So, yeah.
There was a movie with Jimmy Wong Yu called A Man Called Tiger, and I believe that Bruce Lee was originally supposed to be the star of that film, but then I think because he had this bad blood with the director Lo Wei, that he refused to work with him again. So,
bummer.
So again, and that's funny too, because
was he
Jimmy
just
Wong Yu was
very unsafe with how he choreographed the whole thing or shot everything?
Well, I read different things. I read that like Lo Wei was more interested in gambling on horse races than filming the movie, and that he would fall asleep in the chair on set, and Bruce would do all the work or something. So,
wow,
who knows? But it's too bad Bruce never got like a go-to director. Like you said, he didn't work well with Robert Klaus, and he didn't work well with Lo Wei apparently. And then he passed away untimely, so he never got like Jackie Chan had a few different directors like Stanley Tong or like Benny Chan, who had done a few films with him, and Jet Li had you could say Choi Hawk with Once Upon a Time in China films, and
those
Donnie Yen worked with Wilson Yip a ton of times. So, Bruce never had that director-actor team going for him, really.
He kind of didn't need it at the same time. Like, he knew what worked. He just was very instructional, and I guarantee you we wouldn't have what we have today without him either. So it's like it's a tough thing to pin down, but essentially it gets down to he is the godmaster of action. And I now even wonder if I can even call Game of Death 1 or 2 even a complete movie, because I've struggled to watch either one, and it just feels like an incomplete movie,
Yeah, Game of Death 2, I mean, that one I definitely do not consider it a Bruce Lee movie. I mean, I think all they did was take deleted scenes from Enter the Dragon and then paste them in there. But, I mean, the original one, I would count it still, but it's like you said, it's incomplete. I mean, it was a totally different plot. Bruce Lee died, and then they just cobbled together a whole different movie around it. So,
and apparently there's a Redux of it that was released recently.
Yeah, I didn't see that version. I saw like the that one documentary, A Warrior's Journey, where they had found some of the missing footage and included that at the end, where it was just like the 3 pagoda fights, but it had all the extra footage in it with like those other guys that were with him and stuff. Yep. And then in the actual film, they like trimmed that down to only maybe 10 minutes of actual Bruce Lee footage. So
totally. And I mean, I would love it if they could even do kind of a complete like collection of his long lost movies,
Yeah, the one of the things that I kind of gave up on it, but I used to always be checking online for like I thought one day they'll release uncut version of The Big Boss, but I think by now like that whole saw in the head thing has become like just this Loch Ness monster or something that you're probably never going to see it. I mean, and I've read conflicting things on whether or not it was ever in the film to begin with, or whether it was, one person said it looked bad, so they cut it out. Another person said it was too violent, so they cut it out, and this and that. But
he gained the upper hand. I can't have that. No.
But it's interesting too, like watching those old VHS tapes, and then later on seeing, I guess, the most uncut version of some of those films we're ever going to probably get.
I still need to get the whole Blu Ray pack. You got to wait for the price to go down if you want.
The Way of the Dragon had quite a few scenes cut out of it, and
I bet
Big Boss, really, I think it was only like the end kill where he did like the finger jab where he like pierced the Big Boss's rib cage with his fingers and stuff.
It makes you wonder how they even filmed it,
Yeah. And then I think I guess that's it. I mean, Enter the Dragon, the only releases I've seen, they had like that extra 3-minute scene at the beginning where he was like talking to the Shaolin monk, and I guess that was not in the theatrical version.
Nice. Mm-hmm.
But they did release, I forgot, Criterion Collection released all of his films a couple summers ago. And I guess they did include the theatrical version, but by that time I had bought so many copies, I didn't go for it. But
totally. And I mean, I think it helped that Bruce was all over the place, just making appearances as Kato on both on Batman, doing some other TV guest spots. But I mean, I think it helps that we'll always check out something he's in, because we just realize what a smart person he is, and
yeah, and just that, one of those household names. I mean, even if somebody's never seen his films, chances are they know Bruce Lee. My wife actually bought, when we found out we were having a baby, she bought this like the Game of Death yellow and black kind of a track suit. It was like for babies, and then she said, whether or not it's a boy or a girl, we can have them wear it. And turned out to be a boy, so I think it's for about 9 months old. So as soon as he can fit into that, I'm gonna get a picture of him in it.
There you go.
And speaking of him, I gotta cut it short so I can go get him some formula.
Oh, good. I'm just glad we were able to talk about this. And I mean, the fact I always knew Bruce was kind of a thing. The fact that there was an Xbox game based on the premises to his movies in the 2000s. So it's like, yeah, who are you kidding? But if you haven't seen Bruce, then you don't call yourself an action fan. Just don't.
I mean, there's always all those fighting games had, Liu Kang in Mortal Kombat and Fei Long in Street Fighter, and pretty much all those fighting games had like the Bruce Lee character in them.
1000%. So thank you ever so much for being on here, and we will do another fun get-together very soon.
Definitely, yeah. This one was a lot of fun. I had to be a part of it.
We'll return after these messages.
Hey, feeling down? Feeling low? Not enough podcasts about movies in your life? Why not try...
They must be destroyed on sight!
The new Podcast Cure-All, sure to get you right with the world and on a path to better living. We have exploitation, we have Italian horror, we have zombies, we have slashers, we have crime films, we have spaghetti westerns, we even have sci-fi and sex comedies. So take a dose of...
They must be destroyed on sight!
As needed, and let the hosts, Lee Russell, Daniel Harper, Paul Romali, and the odd guest host cure what ails you.
Warning, may cause atrophy, African consumption, black fever, bone shave, chin cough, colic, cramp colic, dropsy of the brain, elephantitis, grocer's itch, jaundice, mania, miasma, mortification, palsy, Pott's disease, rheumatism, scurvy, St. Anthony's fire, summer complaint, and worm fit in some people. Consult a physician before listening.
Did you ever see a film at such a young age it left you traumatized with cinematic wounds? Necrophilia. It's a dead issue, man. Don't push it. Cinema Psyops is a weekly podcast documenting an ongoing experiment on the mind of an unwilling test subject.
No one should have to watch this movie.
Oh, no one should have to watch this?
No one should have to watch this movie.
Surprisingly, it's not a topic that a lot of people really want to tackle.
I'm shocked, prudes.
I know, really.
Right?
It's the next sexual frontier that no one wants to explore.
I am, in the most sincerest of senses, disappointed in you.
It takes a powerful goddess like Connie, jam her arm down the monster's throat and kill it. Oh, I'm still tripping out over that. Even as a kid, I was like, I gotta find a girl like that. Every week, I get a new look of disappointment that I never thought I could get out of it.
Unimaginable. At 12 years old, you should not be watching this movie.
Obviously.
At 13, you should not be. 14, you shouldn't be. I'm not entirely sure even 17-year-olds should be watching this movie.
Just because you're offended by something doesn't mean that you have the right to demand that it doesn't exist. Watching this film again, I had all of this like little nerd glee with everything that kept
little history all popping up
absolutely.
at you.
So I totally loved this film.
Hey, I know why you couldn't see that. It's because your brain's warped from watching this shit at 12 years old.
Yeah, this is a rough movie. I told you ahead of time when we were getting ready to do it that it was going to be a rough
How could you watch
one.
this shit at 12?
Because physical wounds heal, cinematic ones don't. Listen to Cinema Psyops.
Hey everybody, I'm Corey.
And I'm Zach, and we're the hosts of Podcasting After Dark, a cast dedicated to late-night horror and sci-fi of the 80s and 90s, often found on HBO and Cinemax.
You know, the movies your parents didn't want you watching as a kid. You can find us every other week on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podbean, and Stitcher.
This is what you want.
This is what you get.
It's time, let's check our queue, baby. Pair it with a couple brews, baby. We love good movies. We love the bad ones too. So we watch them all and pass their lessons on to you. Oh yeah. Everything I learned from movies helps to make life a little bit groovy. Whether one last plot holes or gratuitous movies, it's time to get busy with your friend Steve and Izzy at eilfm.podbean.com.
Welcome to Who Was She podcast. I am your host, Tara Jabari. After a decade working in documentaries, marketing, and all things digital media, I found that podcasting is a strong medium to share stories. After years of producing for others, I decided to start my own biographical podcast. Who Was She will focus on the life of a woman throughout Baha'i history. The first season is about Lydia Zemenov. Lydia's story explores the subjects of the power of language and faith. Her father invented the universal language Esperanto, and she came from a Jewish family and became a Baha'i. She grew up during World War I and was killed during World War II in a concentration camp, despite heroic efforts to save her life. How can one person's life intersect with so many others, connect across borders, and inspire a biography which inspired this podcast? Over the next few weeks, I will share her story with you and the lives that were most affected by her and those who affected her life as well. They include her father, Ludwig Zemenov, her spiritual mother, American journalist Martha Root, and the Baha'i German soldier Fritz Mako, who worked for the resistance undercover while having to serve the Nazi Party. I want to thank the author Wendy Heller and George Ronald Publishing for their blessing to let me use Heller's biography, Lydia, The Life of Lydia Zemenov, Daughter of Esperanto, as a main and instrumental resource for this podcast. So please subscribe and learn about this amazing woman who traveled through 3 continents in an effort to bring unity through the power of language. You can also find more information on our Instagram, Facebook, and Pinterest at Who Was She Podcast. Music was composed and performed by Sam Red. I am your host, Tara Jabari. Join us next time as we begin our journey about Lydia Zemenov.
The Jacked Up Review Show can also be followed on Facebook on both the page and the group. Feel free to chat, leave questions, make requests for future episodes. You can also follow us on Instagram and Twitter. Thank you so much for your various support, and we'll continue to entertain the hell out of you. Till then, take care.